There is a specific kind of betrayal that happens not with a scandal or a headline, but with a receipt. You paid for something you used to trust. The food arrived. And somewhere between opening the bag and finishing the meal, something registered that this is no longer the place it was. Not because the price went up, though it did. Because the company on the other side of that transaction decided your loyalty was worth less than whatever they gained by quietly taking it for granted. Today we are looking at 12 restaurant chains where that moment happened. Some of them admitted it, some denied it while the evidence was already circulating. Some did it through the people they sold themselves to. All 12 of them lost the trust of the people who built them, and the numbers sitting in bankruptcy filings, earnings calls, and federal courtrooms show exactly what that trust was worth once it was gone. Subscribe before we start. Number 12. Hooters. Neil Ackerman, one of the original founders of Hooters, stood in a bankruptcy court in 2025 and used language that very rarely appears in a corporate legal filing. He described the private equity firms that had owned the company as operators with no history or experience with the Hooters brand, and made clear that the founders themselves had to write a check to buy back the company they created from the people who had been paid to run it. Hooters filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in March 2025 with $376 million in debt. Triartisan Capital Advisors, the firm that owned it, had extracted $70 million in debt-financed dividend distributions in 2022, moving cash upstream to themselves while loading that debt onto the restaurant chain. By the time the bankruptcy was filed, suppliers had gone unpaid for months, beer distributors had moved locations to cash on delivery, and employees on internal forums were describing a management instruction to make smaller wings look bigger on the plate by spreading them out before service. 48 locations had already closed in the year before the filing. Another 30 went dark in the weeks after. The founders did not save Hooters because they thought the business was recoverable. They saved it because customers who had spent decades in those dining rooms deserved better than watching it disappear into a legal filing that nobody outside a courtroom was ever supposed to read. The wings got smaller and the debt got bigger at the same time. That is not a coincidence. It is a business model. Number 11. Cracker Barrel. The biscuit was never just a side dish at Cracker Barrel. It was the reason you pulled off the highway. Tall, layered, still steaming when it arrived, the proof that someone in that kitchen had gotten up early and actually made something from scratch. For 50 years, that biscuit and the kitchen behind it were the entire value proposition of the brand. In August 2025, Cracker Barrel changed its logo for the first time in 48 years, removing the old-timer figure that had been on the sign since 1969 and deleting the words Old Country Store from the brand. Within days, the President of the United States had posted about it publicly. Customer traffic fell 8% almost immediately. The logo was reversed within 10 days, setting a record for the most expensive way possible to confirm that you do not understand your own customers. But the logo was not the betrayal, it was the distraction from the betrayal. Underneath it, a nearly $700 million modernization program had spent years replacing scratch cooking stations with thaw and pour pouches, centralizing bread production rather than baking in the restaurant, and cutting the prep crews who had always arrived before sunrise. Revenue fell 7% in fiscal Q2 2026. Customer visits fell 10%. The customers who drove 15 minutes out of their way for that biscuit were not confused about what changed. They could taste it. The logo going up and coming down in 10 days was the company finally being honest, for once, about how much of the original thing it had already quietly destroyed. Number 10. Chipotle. Steve Ells built Chipotle in Denver in 1993 on a promise so simple it barely needed a slogan. Food with integrity, fresh ingredients, generous portions. A burrito that tasted like someone had made a decision about it rather than simply assembled components from a cost reduction spreadsheet. For over a decade, the promise was real, and the price reflected it honestly. Then the videos appeared. Thousands of them, across TikTok and Reddit, from Sacramento to Boston, all showing the same scene. A scoop dragged halfway across a steam tray. A chicken portion that once filled the bowl now barely covering the rice underneath it. A bowl that used to feed an adult sold at the price of a meal that was supposed to feed an adult. In May 2024, Chipotle's chief corporate affairs officer went on Good Morning America and stated on camera that there had been no changes to portion sizes. She said this while the videos were circulating on every platform, while line cooks across the country had been instructed by their managers to scoop less, and while the CEO was preparing to acknowledge on a public earnings call that some locations had not been serving consistent portions and retraining was already underway, the spokesperson denied it. The CEO confirmed it. Same company, same building, same week. Shareholders sued in November 2024. Roughly $6.5 billion in market value disappeared on that news. For the full year of 2025, Chipotle posted its first negative same-store sales in over a decade. The chain that built itself on food with integrity had a securities class action lawsuit over hidden portion cuts and a public spokesperson who contradicted her own CEO on national television. Number 9. Red Lobster. The Cheddar Bay biscuits arrived warm before you had finished reading the menu. That was never a side item. It was proof that someone in the kitchen cared about the 15 minutes before your actual meal. Red Lobster built a 50-year identity on exactly that feeling. Affordable seafood in landlocked cities, a Friday night that felt like a small occasion. In 2014, Golden Gate Capital bought Red Lobster for $2.1 billion and almost immediately sold the buildings and land underneath nearly 500 of those restaurants for $1.5 billion in a sale-leaseback at arrangement. That money went to Golden Gate, not back into the business. Red Lobster, which had owned its restaurants outright, became a tenant overnight, paying rent on its own dining rooms with automatic 2% annual increases built into leases already priced above market. By 2023, those rent payments had reached $191 million a year, roughly 10% of total revenue. The Endless Shrimp promotion lost $11 million in a single quarter when it was made permanent. Red Lobster filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in May 2024 with nearly $300 million in debt. Locations closed overnight. Employees arrived to find locked doors. The customers who came back because the biscuits were still good found the building dark with a paper sign on the glass. The biscuits were never the problem. The financial architecture underneath the dining room was designed from the beginning to extract value rather than protect it, and the only people who did not know that were the regulars who kept showing up until there was nowhere left to show up to. Number 8. TGI Fridays. Thank God it is. Friday was not just a name. For an entire generation, it described an actual feeling. Alan Stillman opened the first location on Manhattan's Upper East Side in 1965, and the chain spent decades as the default answer to where do you want to go after work. At its peak, more than 600 U.S. restaurants carried that promise on their doors. In 2014, private equity firms, Tri-Artisan Capital Advisors, and Sentinel Capital Partners bought TGI Fridays for $890 million in a leveraged buyout, putting $670 million of debt directly onto the restaurant chain to help finance the purchase. Tri-Artisan later became sole owner. From 601 U.S. locations in 2008, the chain had shrunk to roughly 161 by the time it filed Chapter 11 in November 2024, a 55% contraction, with sales down 63% over the same period. By April 2025, just 85 locations remained, an 86% drop from the peak. Here is the detail that connects this segment to the one before it and the one after it. Tri-Artisan is the same firm that owned Hooters when it went bankrupt, the same playbook, the same firm. 2 bankruptcies in under 12 months. The customers sitting in those TGI Fridays booths on a Friday night did not know who owned the chain. They just noticed the food got worse, the prices went up, the staff got thinner, and eventually the Friday night that used to feel like a reward started feeling like an overpriced obligation. Number 7. Denny's. Open around the clock for over 70 years, Denny's built its identity around a promise that was almost radical in its simplicity. The people everyone else forgot about after midnight, the overnight shift worker, the trucker, the college student at 2 a.m., this place was for them too. No reservation required, no dress code, just a booth and a hot plate at whatever hour you needed it. In November 2025, Denny's agreed to be taken private for approximately $620 million by a group led by Tri-Artisan Capital Advisors, the same firm. A third restaurant chain acquisition after TGI Fridays and Hooters, both of which ended in bankruptcy court. The acquisition adds $335 million of new debt directly onto Denny's books. Tri-Artisan's co-founder described the deal as building on their success with other full-service restaurant concepts. TGI Fridays, Hooters. Those are the successes he was describing. A viral calculation tracking the price of the Lumberjack Slam over the past decade showed it climbing from $5.99 to $17.99 today. Denny's same-store sales fell 2.9% in the quarter before the deal closed. The company had already announced 150 location closures. The American Consumer Satisfaction Index ranked Denny's the worst full-service restaurant chain in the country in 2025. The diner that existed for the people everyone else forgot now belongs to the investment firm that already proved twice what it does with the restaurants it acquires. The customers who had nowhere else to go at 2 a.m. are about to find out what comes next. Drop a 7 in the comments if you are still with us. The next 6 are the ones people are still arguing about. Subscribe if you have not yet. Number 6. Panera Bread. Panera Bread gave its customers 2 very specific reasons to stop trusting it, and then confirmed both of them on the public record. The first was the food. Paul Carbone, Panera's own CEO, admitted publicly that the company had spent years deliberately making the food worse. He called it death by 1,000 cuts, cheaper lettuce, smaller protein portions, thinner soups, bread that stopped being baked fresh in every restaurant and started arriving frozen from a third-party factory, finished in a warmer at the back of the store. The company named after bread decided that baking bread was the cost it could no longer afford to maintain. The second was the charged lemonade, a drink placed at a self-service station beside regular iced teas and lemonades, containing up to 400 milligrams of caffeine, marketed as a clean, plant-based refreshment, with no meaningful warning on the dispenser. 2 people died after consuming it. A 21-year-old University of Pennsylvania student named Sarah Katz, who had a heart condition, and a 6-year-old man with an underlying heart condition. Panera settled the lawsuits, removed the drink from the menu, and described the removal as a menu transformation rather than a product recall. A Pick 2 combo at Panera now regularly costs $13 or more for a meal its own CEO confirmed had been deliberately made cheaper to produce for several years. When the person running the company goes on record describing the systematic degradation of his own product and the company keeps the premium price exactly where it was, the customer paying that price is not being served. They are being managed. Number 5. Applebee's. Friday night, a corner table. 2-for-1 drinks, and enough noise in the room to feel like the work week had actually ended. Applebee's never needed to be anyone's favorite restaurant. It just needed to be familiar, affordable, and already on the way home. That position served the brand for decades and grew it to more than 1,500 locations across the country. The chain has now posted 7 consecutive quarters of year-over-year same-store sales declines, 7 in a row without a single quarter of relief. A major franchise operator covering 50 locations across Florida, Georgia, and Alabama filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in March 2026. Court filings list restaurants in Orlando, Tampa, Maitland, Ocala, and Tifton as having proved unprofitable, which is the legal way of saying the community around those restaurants made a collective decision to stop showing up and kept making it long enough to turn into a federal courthouse document. The customers Applebee's relied on most, households earning under $50,000 a year, pulled back first and pulled back hardest. When they did visit, they spent less per order. The CEO of parent company Dine Brands called it check management on a recorded earnings call. The customers called it deciding the riblet was not worth what it cost anymore. 7 quarters is not a bad stretch. It is a sustained verdict, delivered one Friday night at a time, by people who used to come every week and then quietly stopped. Number 4. IHOP. Close your eyes for a moment. Butter melting into a stack of pancakes that arrived taller than they needed to be. The small bottles of syrup lined up on the table. The particular ease of a Sunday morning with nowhere to be. IHOP built a breakfast identity on that specific feeling across 60-plus years and roughly 1,600 locations. In May 2025, state health inspectors walked into an IHOP on Daniel Ellis Drive in Charleston, South Carolina, and found ham sitting on the serving line for 14 days. The legal maximum is 7. Pancake batter and steak were also held past the legal limit. Liquid eggs stored at 58 degrees Fahrenheit when the law requires 41. Expired bell peppers with bags bloated from spoilage. Fruit flies in the dish area. Silverware that was not being properly sanitized. The location received a C grade. It received the same grade on subsequent visits, until it finally closed its doors permanently in June 2025. A local physician commenting on the findings told reporters that for anyone over 65, conditions like those are not a minor quality issue, they are a genuine health risk. In the first quarter of 2026, parent company DNA Brands saw its adjusted free cash flow swing from $14.6 million positive the year before to $3 million negative. 40 locations closed in those 3 months, while only 24 opened. The syrup bottles are still on the table at surviving locations. What they are supposed to accompany has been quietly downgraded in ways a health inspector had to make public because the company was not going to. Number 3. Wendy's. Dave Thomas opened the first Wendy's in Columbus, Ohio in 1969, on the conviction that a fresh, never-frozen patty cooked to order was worth the extra minute, the square hamburger, the Frosty. 50 years of standing for something specific in a category full of interchangeable options. That specificity was the brand, and for 5 decades, it held. In February 2024, CEO Kirk Tanner announced on a recorded earnings call, in front of investors who responded positively, that Wendy's was exploring dynamic pricing. The technology airlines used to raise fares on Christmas Eve applied to a lunchtime burger combo. The company wanted to charge customers more during busy periods, when people were hungriest and most likely to pay whatever was on the board. The announcement was so specific, so clearly thought through at the executive level, that the clarification that followed felt less like a correction and more like a company realizing too late that it had said the quiet part out loud. The backlash family of 4 eating at McDonald's now spends over $35 on average, a figure the company's own CEO has acknowledged on a recorded earnings call as damaging to value perception across the entire system. U.S. same-store sales fell 3.6% in the first quarter of 2025, the worst domestic performance since the pandemic. The CEO confirmed on a recorded earnings call that traffic from lower and middle-income households was down by nearly double digits. An organized boycott coordinated by the People's Union USA ran through June 2025, citing price practices and the chain's conduct more broadly. McDonald's launched the McValue menu and a $2.5 McDouble deal in response. A widely circulated customer calculation noted that since 2015, general inflation would price a $2015 at around $1.37 today. McDonald's pricing moved nowhere close to that line and called the result a value offering. The people who built McDonald's into the most visited restaurant in human history are the same people the CEO confirmed are now staying away by double digits. The brand that promised $1 could always get you a meal has not kept that promise for years, and the millions of Americans who needed it to be true are the ones who noticed first. Number 1. Starbucks. Howard Schultz built the modern Starbucks vision on a concept borrowed from Italian espresso bars and turned into something distinctly American. The third place, somewhere between home and work that belonged to you for the price of a latte, the name on the cup. The particular ritual of a familiar order, executed the same way, at the same counter every single morning. Starbucks held that position for 30 years, and 30 years of daily habit is not something a brand loses by accident. By the end of 2025, Starbucks had posted 6 consecutive quarters of negative same-store sales in the United States, 6 straight quarters of customers making a different choice every morning. The CEO who arrived to fix it, Brian Niccol, came with a compensation package worth just under $98 million, confirmed by public filings as the highest CEO-to-worker pay ratio in the entire S&P 500. The median Starbucks employee made $14,674 in the same year, 6,677 times less than the person hired to turn the company around. Over 500 U.S. locations are closing as part of a $1 billion restructuring. The Reserve Roastery in Seattle, one of the first Starbucks locations to unionize, was among the first selected for permanent closure. On Red Cup Day in November 2025, the busiest single shift on the Starbucks calendar, over 1,000 workers walked out in 17. Nobody organized them. They each made the same quiet calculation individually on a Tuesday afternoon or a Friday night or a Sunday morning, and arrived at the same answer at different times. The receipt was not worth the trust it was asking them to keep extending. Restaurant prices have risen 34% since 2019, outpacing overall inflation by a significant margin. The chains growing right now are the ones that use that pressure as a reason to earn the visit more carefully, rather than extract more from the customer who kept coming out of habit. The 12 chains on this list made the other choice. The millions of Americans who stopped trusting them noticed. And trust, once a receipt takes it away, does not come back because a press release promises it will. Which chain on this list lost your trust first? Drop the name in the comments. I read almost every one.